Hey, Patrick, if you're listening to this, do something loud so we can get started.
Is that how he laughs? I don't know. Okay.
No, I feel like the way Patrick laughs is if it catches him by surprise, he goes,
Yeah, he does. He goes, ha! Or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're listening to The Janchi Show, hosted by 3 Korean American adoptees diving headfirst into what it means to be adopted, Korean American, and more. And now, here's your hosts, Nathan, Patrick, and KJ.
Welcome back to The Janchi Show. It has been a while. My name is Nathan Nowak. I am here with KJ Roelke, and our third co-host, Patrick Armstrong, is not here, but he, I'm sure, is waving hello. How are you doing, KJ?
sorry.
There. He's here.
No, I'm doing good. Yeah, Patrick's here with us in spirit and in my impressions of his laugh. I'm doing good. Whenever this comes out, it will be less than 100 days until our baby's official due date, which is still wild. Sarah just texted me. She said, "You scared the baby." That's very funny.
And the reason Patrick isn't here is because he's on daddy duties. I guess this is the day after Mother's Day, so I'm sure they are still enjoying their parenthood right now. So, and their little Armstrong is so cute.
Yeah, and it's the eyebrows for me. He's already so charming out the gate with those eyebrows. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to put on a great show, and part of that great show is explaining to you what Janchi means at the top of the show and not the end of the show. So Janchi means to feast, and we believe that you can't. If you're throwing a feast, aren't you celebrating something? And that's what we're here to do. We're here to celebrate and to explore and share our perspectives as adoptees, as interracial adoptees, as Asian adoptees. And we today have a guest that is really, really fantastic.
It feels great to get back into it, to do a solo episode, and now to also do an interview with a guest and hear their story. So I really like that. I like getting back into it. And I like hanging out with you there, KJ.
Yeah, totally. It's wild because, like, I think the last solo we had, we were like, man, it's crazy that we're still doing this. Not that any of us really had any intention of quitting, but I think it's more just like, it's been almost 4 years. It's been 3.5 years since we've been doing that. And when I think about like how much of the world has changed in 3.5 years, it's just like, wow, it's pretty wild. And it is certainly harder. Apparently having kids makes your schedule just hard to do anything, but
not at all.
Oh yes, this is the guy with 3 kids. Patrick is like, I don't know how to do timing is hard, and I'm like, I don't even have a baby yet, and I'm always like, I don't even know how I'm gonna do anything with my life. So but yeah, I'm just excited to yeah, exactly. I'm excited to get back into it, and I'm always excited to be giving our platform over to another adoptee to tell their story. And our guest today, Amy Esposito, is I think we couldn't have asked for a better interview to jump back into. She is so engaging, and she has such a unique story. Even than I think a lot of the stories that I've had the privilege of hearing, just in the way that she was able to grow up and the community surrounding her to where she is now. And she's so thoughtful, and I don't know. I feel like she would say something, and my brain would be like, oh, I need to think about that. But then also my other part of it would be like, hey, you're doing a podcast. You need to like be prepared to ask a question.
Hopefully not too many pauses of us thinking.
No, they all got edited out. That's fine. So anyways, yeah, we're so excited for you to listen to our conversation with Amy. So without further ado, we're going to roll that tape. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the interview portion of the Janchi Show. It is fantastic to be here with you, with co-host Nathan. Patrick is on dad duty, so he is not available to join for this portion. But our guest today, this episode, is Amy Esposito. Amy, where are you calling in from? And also, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. I am calling in from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Just moved down here, so it's a little bit of a culture shock, but
Okay. Right on. Well, Amy, we're so excited to have you on the show, and we're going to kick it off the way that we kick off every guest episode. Please tell us your story in as much or as little detail as feels good to you.
Yes, absolutely. So I was adopted to northern New Jersey, and interestingly enough, it was a Korean immigrant community. So it was pretty much Koreatown, right outside New York City. So I had a really interesting experience, I think, at least in my opinion, where I grew up with a lot of Korean peers. They were first generation or they came from some other marginalized Korean group. And we kind of all came from this wavelength of we're Korean, but there's something about us that has displaced us. So we were all kind of together trying to find what our identity was. And then on top of that, my aunt is Korean. So I have an aunt that came from Korea, and I got a little bit of that viewpoint of, well, this is your culture. You're Korean. This is what's yours. And you should never not identify as a Korean person.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting because when we first got started, our producer at the time, Jerry Wan, he got connected with us, or we got connected with him rather, and put us all together in a room. And I think he made the remark, it was like, it takes very little for Korean adoptees, and I assume this is generally probably true across many interracial, international adoptees. It takes very little to make that person who is growing up outside of their racial community, whatever, to get them to feel like they are truly who they are. Like for you, you had you had a whole community. But for me, I had like some people who, and as I was growing up, I was like, oh yeah, no, you're Korean. And maybe I couldn't voice it because I was like 12 at the time, but it's like, but if you get one yes, sometimes that unlocks a whole different world, a whole different perspective, a whole avenue of possibilities for how you perceive yourself. I'm so curious, what were some like standout memories of like celebratory ethnic Koreanness amongst your time growing up in New Jersey?
Well, I can definitely pinpoint where it all began, where it is just this absolute core memory for me that I think just made me the person I was for the rest of my life until now. I was a kid and, we're meeting everybody in school and they're like, oh, hey, I'm Grace, I'm Jin, I'm this, that, the other thing. And I go to introduce myself. And I'm like, yeah, I'm Amy. And they're like, but wait, no, what is your Korean name? And I didn't think of it because I was just a kid. And I was like, oh, yeah, I got one of those too. I'm Suja. And then ever since then, I've actually been known as Suja all the way through my high school graduation.
Wow. Huh.
And it was like this key that unlocked this, you belong with us, you're in this brotherhood, and just ran with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think I've mentioned this on the show. I use my Korean name a lot for like my online usernames and things. So on the one hand, like it does feel very authentically mine. It feels like a part of who I am. But on the other hand, because I predominantly use it online, I'm like, but it's also like not me. It's like this alternate, like alter ego version of me. And then like sometimes, like these days, so I live in Dallas and there's a decent Korean population here. And so I'll introduce myself, whatever. And they'll be like, oh, what's your name? KJ. I'm like, do you have a Korean name? I'm like, yeah, it's Juntae. And they'll be like, oh, June, because June is more common. So they'll be like, oh, June. I'm like, what? It's Juntae. And then they're like, oh, yeah. It just like becomes a whole thing. So yeah, it's so interesting that you had like oh no, this is my Korean name. And then that's just how you were known the whole time. Yeah. Did they add like, would you say it was Suja?
Yes.
So would they call you Suja Ya, or would they just say like Suja and then like whatever?
So it was New Jersey. So it was a very unique brand of Konglish, I guess.
Okay.
So it'd be Suja, random Korean words, random New Jersey slang. I don't think any of it would make sense out of in any other context. But it was definitely not formal Korean. So it was really interesting. My peers had a type of Korean American accent, but they were born here. So they just kind of absorbed their parents' accent. And then we're all living in Jersey outside of New York City. So I don't know if anyone could have understood us.
Yeah, so interesting.
During that time that you were, accepting your name and identifying a little bit as that, did you ever consider changing your name?
I actually have. And I had this long discussion with my husband, and I'm still thinking about it. I did take his last name, where you don't normally do that in Korea, but my aunt has done it. And now that I think about it, I'm like, if I become Suja Esposito, it sounds a little strange, because when I think about my aunt Sue, and I'm like, oh my goodness, all of that together is quite a mouthful. So I'm thinking about it. But I actually do love my name, Amy. And my mom explained to me we had to name you Amy because we already knew from the start that we loved you so much and we wanted you so bad. So I hold that really close to my heart as well. So if I can figure out how to put it together, I think I will absolutely do that.
Very cool. Yeah, I've known a lot of people who have changed their names back to their Korean names, and I've always thought about it myself. And I like my name, like KJ. I use it as a screen name sometimes, or I use it as, I don't know. It's funny when I think about it that way. I'm like, I'm using it as like a screen name for kind of like an anonymous, person, but yet it's really my name.
Right.
I think that's great that I appreciate anyone who changes their name or decides not to change their name. I think it's it's just neat hearing how everyone thinks about it. So I had a question about your aunt, and you said that she was always trying to introduce you more into the culture. What kinds of examples do you have where she would do something for you? Is there like gifts, or did she talk about holidays, or how did she include you?
Yes. Oh my gosh. And thinking back on this as an adult, she was very clever and very sly about it, because I think she understood the sensitive nature of our family dynamics. I mean, my family has a lot of dynamics on their own, and then you just kind of got to add this interracial adoption on top of it. So at first it would be, oh, I picked up this book for you at the bookstore, and it was how to read Hangul. Or, oh, last time I went to Korea, I got all this stuff for you, and here's what it means, here's what it represents, and I thought this would be really important for you. And that's actually how I grew my creepy Korean doll collection. It's in a box. My husband is absolutely terrified of it. But so she'd bring me all these little things back and tell me, oh, this is a really important part of the culture, or this is what a traditional wedding would have looked like, or, this is what this would be in Korean. These are popular Korean foods. And she never addressed it outright, but she was very clever on how to sneak it into my life growing up so that it was just a normal part of me and nothing that I needed to learn about per se because it was external to me. It was, this is just something we share as Korean people together.
And that's great. I find that, inspiring, and that it wasn't, forced upon you or something that you were, trying to avoid, or like some people say they never wanted to go to the Korean camps that were out there, and then they were just kind of forced to go to them. But that she just kind of slyly inserted it into daily things, and you just, associated it with it. And I think that's really cool. And very clever of her as well. So props, Auntie.
Well,
actual auntie, not just like auntie, like we all say auntie.
Yeah.
Well, all of her children, I mean, obviously they're half Korean. But I think, and they're a lot older than me, so I think she learned a lot from how to approach the culture question from her own experiences.
Yeah, I love that you said, it was never a thing that you had to quote unquote learn about. Like your Koreanness was never an external factor. I'm expecting my first kid in August, and my wife is white, and that's something that we've talked about a lot together, or something we've talked about on the show, is how do you make Koreanness just a part of the fabric in a way that feels organic, but at the same time, like maybe behind the scenes, like as an adoptee and a parent, I'm like frantically researching like how to do the thing, you know, whatever, whether that's like cooking the food, or am I celebrating Children's Day correctly, or you know, whatever that is. Yeah, I just think that that's like so interesting, yeah, and clever, and big props to your actual auntie. So I'm curious, what, because you mentioned family dynamics, but what was your parents' take on, obviously they adopted you, but what was your parents' take on you being Korean, and like the, I guess, ethnic versus like racial conversation in regards to like race in America? Was there like a, oh, we can celebrate you as like, we get you're Korean and you go do Korean things, but we don't really talk about race, or what was that like, just with your parents?
Ooh, this is a really interesting question. So my parents never talked about race. We've never had this conversation. They're the kind of people where they never talk about their emotions. They don't talk about any hard questions. So my only lifeline was really my relationship with my aunt, my relationship with my paternal grandmother, and she was the only person I would have this conversation with, because she would say, well, in their own family drama, she's like, you're my only non-blood related, relative here, and you're the only one I love. but yes, so there are a lot of dynamics happening. And the only conversation I've ever had with anyone in my immediate family was my one brother that I'm very close to. He's trying to awkwardly have some talks with me in high school about different topics. And he's like, now, Aim, if you get pulled over by the cops, you're okay because you're white. And there was like this 10-second pause, absolute silence in his white Mustang as we stared ahead, and the realization dawned on him that I was adopted. So in a very cool way, they were colorblind. Mm-hmm. But I think it was also a little damaging, because it wasn't until I became an adult that I was like, oh my gosh, if not for my Aunt Sue, I might be like way more emotionally traumatized than I am right now. Gosh, you said something earlier that my brain cells latched onto here was, am I celebrating this right? Am I doing this right as a Korean person? And I think I've learned through my family, my weird mix of, multiracial family and the Korean community I grew up in, there really is no right way to be Korean. And I learned this when I became an adult, that in Korea, not everyone is super, super Christian. Not everyone has all of these, beliefs or ways that they live their life. So I'm grateful for growing up with all these people who, in their own way, didn't feel like 100% connected to the motherland, I guess you could say. But it made me feel like my odd brand of being Korean was normal.
Yeah, no, I get that. For me, it's like, do I know enough so that I can start messing with it? Like, I'm the kind of person that whenever I make a new recipe, I will make it by the book the first time. Mm-hmm. And then after that, fair game. Yeah. But I was like, somebody wrote it this way. Someone made the time to do it in, follow XYZ steps with XYZ ingredients. So I'm like, I'm going to honor that and then move on. If I disagree, whatever, like politely, I mean, they don't know, they wrote it and they don't even know that I printed it off. But, for me, it's like, do I have the baseline of Koreanness, whatever that is, like Chuseok, mostly for me, it's like, is Chuseok in October, November, or is that the one that's New Year's? But then Solal is like, I think that's also New Year's, but is that like New Year's, or like Lunar New Year? Yeah. So it's more like those kinds of things. Like that I'm like, wait, is this the right time that because I don't want my kid to grow up being like, what are you talking about? Chuseok is in July. And be like, I'm so sorry. I don't know. Apparently my dad was an idiot. So things like that. Okay. So talking about your race and growing up in that way, in your form, something that you wrote that was really interesting was that your Korean American friends would call you a Twinkie. And I think that there have been a number of people who have come on the show, who have shared their story publicly otherwise, where like when that comes from a white friend, you're like, ugh, the microaggression. But when that comes from your own people, you're like, oh, I feel seen, kind of like it's a little rude.
Yes.
But then at the same time, they're like, oh, hey, Twinkie, I got you this thing because you probably don't know about it. So you're like, oh, but also thank you because I actually didn't know about that. But I don't want you to know about that. I didn't know about that. It just was like, oh man, that's so interesting. Like to be in a community, to have that background and that backdrop of just like, we're all Korean immigrants of some kind. We're all just kind of like figuring out and okay with our own brand of Koreanness, which I think is really lovely. And then you move, and then COVID hits, and then,
Yes.
And then, your whole story. And you said it says that you worked a COVID floor at the hospital.
I did.
So can you talk me into? But however much feels safe to you, you don't have to go super deep.
It's all safe. Don't worry. Nothing is off topic.
Talk to me about like what was going on in your brain, in your life, in your adoptee head, especially. Like, yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So, okay. It's a story arc.
I'm here for it.
And growing up from Twinkie through COVID is this story of evolution of how I see myself as a Korean person. Starting with Twinkie, it's one of my favorite memories. We're all sitting around on the couch and they're all being thoughtful and they're like, you're like a Twinkie. And we're all like nodding and we're laughing and we're like,
this is a deep philosophical thought.
Yeah, this was a deep philosophical thought in our child heads.
Yes.
And
that's better than mine.
So deep.
Someone asked me what I thought about the word and I said hungry. So I had no clue what they were getting at. So that was my cluelessness.
And I took it as, and they really meant it like this too, an aggressive form of love. And they're like, yeah, you're yellow on the outside and white on the inside. And they showered me with all of this love about, well, this is what it means to be Korean like us. And here's something cool, just like you said before, here's something cool that I don't think you know about, but you should because it's awesome. A lot of that was like K-pop or food. They would tell me about what was popular fashion-wise and, just all sorts of little cultural stuff. And we could talk about music and TV and everything else that preteens and teens think is cool. Oh my gosh, and then me and the other girls, we could drool over how hot all the K-pop guys were and things like that. And they'd bring me back little things from Myeongdong, which now that I learn as an adult is kind of like the fun tourist area to go through, which brings me to this like side tangent point of they never felt completely Korean either. They were born here, they grew up here. They thought that, shopping at Western brands in Myeongdong was like what it meant to be Korean and never saw the rest of the country. But they had their own feelings of inadequacies and, identity fog as well. They'd go to these Christian events or concerts or things like that. They were all very into church with their families. And they would be the only minority face. So we could really relate to that with each other. We're like a weird brand of Korea.
Yeah. Yeah, with an American brand, sort of.
Yeah. So it was nice bonding over the weird Korean American experience that we had. So I graduate school. I feel super confident. I'm Suja, I'm Amy, and I feel great. So I start going to college and I, get distracted by my first boyfriend who became my first husband. So I had other identities during that time. Then became an adult, started working, and I moved out of the New York, New Jersey area. And that's really when I started thinking like, oh my God, I grew up in a bubble. I am the only Asian person I can see for miles, and people don't see me as one of them. They see me as Korean first and American last. And it's the first time in my life where people have approached me and said, "You learned English so great."
Mm.
And I'm like, what? Where did that come out of?
Yeah.
We're all from America. We're all,
Yeah.
we're all Americans and things like that. So really working, meeting the public and things like that. And then, meeting people for the first time who just assume that English is my second language. Like just the other day, someone was like, "I want CUP." And I'm like, what? What planet are we living on?
What?
So it's the first time in my life, whether intentional or unintentional, I encountered racism from a random guy drunk, hanging out of his car, yelling at me to go back to my country, to well-meaning, cute old people in the hospital telling me, "Your English is so great. Good job." I'm like, oh my gosh. So I had to start thinking, I'm a minority. This is what it means to be a minority, because I've only experienced the positive before this. And I'm like, just a lot was blowing my mind for a few years. And fast forward a little bit to COVID. Back to your question. I'm so sorry. It took me a long time to get here.
Here for the journey. Take all the time you want.
Yeah.
It's your podcast.
This is your show.
So I moved to North Carolina. I've been here 6 years. And I'm working COVID. So I'm in the middle. It's conservative country, as I like to call it. So I try to be very politically neutral. It's super not my thing. You can ask my husband, I'm very like kumbaya, we're all one people. So I start coming to work. It just became such a politically charged thing. And now I've got people who are the most vulnerable they've ever been in their entire lives. They feel like absolute poop because they're in the hospital and they're not feeling great. And they're just looking for someplace to point their fingers at, somebody to blame. And I am the only person there. Because you got to get suited up, you got to put your PPE in. So it is just Amy. It's like, so I heard everything from you people, and you all should go back to your country. Why would you spread this? And it's your fault. And just all kinds of things. So I got weird, all these bullets flying at me of racism, political racism, people who've grown up in the country, and they just haven't been exposed to a lot of things. So on one hand, I would get some curious people asking, what's this, what's that, what's going on, where are you from, and just genuine curiosity. And then on the opposite side, just absolute hostility. So I think that was like the final nail in the coffin of just this veil of pessimism that I had pulled over my body, going from, it is so nice to come from a community of people where we're just all so odd, even though we may not share a lot of stuff, to I've never felt so pushed out of my own, country and my own culture. And I needed to take some time off of work after that to do some inner meditation on who I was and where I felt like I belonged. Because at this point, I'm like, people are seeing me as Korean first, American last, and now I don't even feel American.
Mm. Yeah, I remember we we moved back to Texas in 2021 to be close to family, and Texas being Texas. I mean, it's Dallas, but it's still Texas.
Yes.
And we we did like a 4th of July celebration. I think my parents invited me to go with them to go watch fireworks, and Sarah and I were just like, what are we doing here? Like, it was nice to be with my parents. It's nice to go see fireworks, I guess. But then like my mom started playing some patriotic music, and I was just like, I could have done without the music. Could have done without the. I was like, I like barbecue as much as the next guy. I'll watch some fireworks. These explosions are fun in the sky, I guess. But yeah, I was just like, whoa, gosh, what? And then kind of every year since, I've just been like, how are we feeling about the 4th of July? What's going on? Yeah, that sense of like growing up, I was like, yeah, of course I'm American, and yeah, I'm so proud and happy. I was happy to be American and proud of it and whatever. And then just being like, what am I doing here? So many years on, I totally resonate with that. So you mentioned you worked COVID floor, took some time, and you're like, maybe I need to like think about who I am. Do some meditation, some thinking about that. We are somehow 3-4 years on from quarantine, from COVID, in its first form, right? In the most scary, most unknown form. Where are you in terms of your self-identity as a Korean, as American, and how does adoption play into all of those things?
Where am I? Oh my goodness. Well, I completely went off the rails after COVID. So one thing was working COVID, getting totally burnt out on not just healthcare, but also the people around me. And I'm like, okay, I gotta focus more on me. And then my dad calls and he says, I didn't really want to tell you this, but flashback. When I arrived from Korea and they brought out all the babies to put them in the arms of the parents, my parents received a really chubby little boy. And then someone ran over and said, we gave you the wrong baby. And they got it all sorted out. But that boy was, he passed away. So my dad had called me and said he passed away from COVID. I'm so sorry. And I felt like, even though you grow older, you grow apart from people, but this was like one of the extremely few people that I knew in my actual life in person that was adopted. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'd seen so much death around me, but now it became more personal and more personal. And it made me realize, like, oh my gosh, I mourned for the loss of this amazing human being and the amazing potential and all the amazing things that he could have done. And I mourned that he didn't get a chance to do all these things. And I'm like, he never got to see Korea. He never got to try and find his family. He never got to explore, like, just all these different mental threads. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And it made me look at myself and I'm like, this is going way beyond me getting burnt out of, am I living my authentic life through work? But now I'm like, oh, it's personal. And I'm like, turn to my husband and I'm like, we got to work on our bucket lists. I know we're young, but so I think this is really when I started getting more serious into thinking, what does it mean for me to be an adoptee? Because my entire life, I've thought about myself as this, I like to say displaced Korean, because it, in a sense, it goes beyond us having DNA. We've adopted some kind of culture through that. It may not be this, oh, I grew up in Korea kind of culture, but it's still a type of Korean culture. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what does this all mean for me as an adoptee? Like, what are all the things that I've wanted to do as an adoptee? Because whether I like it or not, the clock is ticking. My birth mother, wherever she is, clock is ticking for her too. I may still be here, but she may not be. And I wanted to start a birth search to try and find her. I just needed answers, whether the answers were yes or no. I just needed some kind of closure. And I started thinking, I really want to go back to Korea too. I want to experience what it's like looking around and everyone's face looks like mine. I want to have these experiences. I want to know what my aunt and my old friends were talking about and how they felt this sense of belonging there. Because now I'm like, I haven't felt like I belonged anywhere in physical space in the past 6 years since coming to North Carolina. And I'm like, there is just this huge empty void, or maybe just a vacuum, because it started sucking in everything that was in my life. And I'm like, I need to put a lid on this and start closing this chapter of my life.
Sorry about your friend. It's interesting that a lot of our identities are coming out of the fogs and have started with big events like a loss or a public tragedy, or like for us the George Floyd or the Atlanta shootings, things like that have caused a lot of people to start self-discovery and to look into something to find something relatable or something more about themselves, or something that has just kind of been a mystery for a very long time. I mean, for me, it was getting married. Actually, that was the thing that caused me to start doing more self-discovery, and with a little bit of motivation from my wife. But it was let's look into those kinds of things, look into my history, and that's for me when I started my birth search as well. Also after seeing AKA Dan's documentary, but it's I'm excited for you in your discoveries that you'll see next. You said next week, right? Or
yes, I'm actually going to Korea next week. It's going to be awesome.
Incredible.
I'm very excited for you. I know it's going to be. I mean, everyone has their opinions about Korea, and as you said, some places definitely don't feel like home, like North Carolina, and some people. For me, like I don't feel at home in Oklahoma, which is where I was raised. I don't feel at home there. So, and I didn't really specifically feel at home when I was in Korea, but I felt something was familiar. I felt something about it was calming, but at the same time chaotic. And I wish I had spent more time there, especially by myself. I wasn't by myself at any point during my trip when I was there. I kind of wish I had been at one point where I could have just kind of got lost and just been like a fly on the wall and just observed everything. But I look, I'm anxious and happy for you on this trip, and good luck with everything that you discover there.
That's actually why I'm going by myself. I know we had mentioned it before, if I was going with a group or not, but I did ultimately decide to go by myself with my husband for that reason.
Okay. Right. And you have an itinerary of places that you want to see, or are you just going to wing it when you get there?
A little bit. I do have a little bit of an itinerary. Some days are more free depending on how tired my husband gets, if he's tired of walking. But so I do want to hit up all the big touristy places. My husband definitely wants to go be a tourist, absorb different culture and things like that. So I scheduled, we're going to see some music, some dancing. He's never had a chance to experience those parts of Korean culture. So it'll be really exciting. We're going to hit some quiet places. I am very much an internal meditation kind of person. So there's a lot of things that I want to work out. And I thought about, I'm like, do I want to go with a group so I can get this external to myself? I can talk to people and just make it, if I speak it into existence, it'll become this thing outside of me. But I'm not trying to separate my shadow self. I want to integrate it into me. So I want to go have my own personal experiences and just have that really intense internal individual journey. So
I love your turns of phrase. It's been hard for me to like figure out a question because I just keep like chewing on what you've said. I'm like, man, it feels really good. And part of that is, so like for this year, one of my word for the year is embodiment, and thinking around what it means to be embodied, what it means to be connected with my body, and all those things. And a lot of that comes with like how I was raised and my specific flavor of Christianity, teaching me essentially like not to trust your body, or that the body is the root of evil, and that the mind is the place that the divine enters in. But now I'm like, well, but what about my body though? So I'm like kind of working to undo and some of that. So you mentioned something about like, I feel like I am out of place, or I don't have a place. Like it just have like, that has been kind of this thread just in listening to your whole conversation and all of your stories, is the idea of being displaced Korean and then going to North Carolina, being like, where do I even have a place to belong? Even though like you're in a home and you have a house and all those things, it's just like, I didn't quite feel right. And then, the idea of, if I go to Korea, can I find some place? But then even, I totally agree with you. Sometimes if I speak, and actually I find it more when I write, if I were to write something, then I write into existence, right? Then it leaves my body and becomes something external, because I'm literally able to see it back on the page, and it becomes a head process. So yeah, man, I hope that you have one of my friends who went to Korea, she mentions like a park on Jeju, or a park bench in Jeju Island. She was able to sit and just like be and let Korea and her body converse and like have that moment. But I hope that you find that moment too. And certainly that your husband understands the right distance, the right vector to approach or to not approach. Because it's such an interesting time, and every Korean adoptee's experience going back to Korea is so unique and so special and so different. I don't think I have asked this, and we've kind of talked around this some, but what was your like entrance, I guess, your first like kind of conscious thought as an adoptee, like that adoptee might be an identity that you hold beyond just like, oh, I'm adopted, but like, what was that like first kind of moment for you?
Oh, goodness. I've had a lot of moments, because being an adoptee is, I feel like people are like jewels, and every piece of our lives are like jewels as well, because we have so many facets and sides to it. So being an adoptee, there's so many sides to that I have discovered along different points of my life. I always knew I was adopted because my parents would say, you're Korean, but you're also Polish and Czech and this and that. And they would naturally say it like, and this is what you are too, things like that. So I'm like, okay, great. I am all of these things. This is so cool. My child brain didn't really understand, like, you're not that physically, but I'm like, I think I am. So I always knew I was adopted, but I didn't know any depth to that. I just knew I did not come out of my mom's stomach. Came out of somebody else's, but not sure what that means. Then in school, fast forward a few years, one book that we were reading in a language class had to do, I think it was Are You My Mother or something like that. And the teacher had pulled me out into the hallway to ask me, and I know she was trying to be sensitive, but I never would have been something I thought of. She goes, will you be okay if I read this book? If you feel uncomfortable, it's okay. You can go and you can sit in the office, but just want to make sure. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, why are you asking me this? What? Why? What in the heck? So that started a few years of thinking, people see me as someone who doesn't belong. And that was weird. I never felt like that. My family never made me to feel like that, even though we didn't look alike. I never, ever felt like I didn't belong. And for the first time for that to happen, to come from a stranger, it was absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. And then later on, as an adult, coming face to face with one of my first major health problems, or I guess, well, my only health problem, thank goodness. And having someone trying to grill me about, what's your medical history? Are you sure you don't know anything? And I'm like, dude, I said the first time, I have no idea I'm adopted. I really don't know. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this just goes beyond my emotional things. There's absolute physical consequences to this as well. And I'm like, I know it makes it harder for you to do your job as to what medications or may not be working and which direction we want to go in. But I'm sorry. And which became a theme in my life that I'm still grappling with today is starting from that moment when that teacher pulled me out of the room. I increasingly found myself apologizing for who I was and what I was. And it's nothing that I could have changed or picked and I'm like, well, maybe this is also being Korean because I am just so being held to my family line right now. And I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that apology has been something that I did for so long, where it was always something about not knowing something or just apologizing for being an adoptee or who I am or things like that. And I would say these last 3 years have been, a huge change in that viewpoint for myself and for my wife even. Yeah, no, that's. I would have one question, kind of in those same lines. Was there ever any talk with your parents on why they chose that area of New Jersey to live in?
That is actually where they're from.
Okay.
So back in the days of the gangs of New York, there's a little truth to it. So my parents adopted me when they were at the very last age you could be in your 40s to adopt a child. So the generations are spread out. So my paternal grandmother would tell me these stories about growing up as an immigrant child in the 30s, which I extremely resonated with. We both had this identity of we don't fit in growing up and not having some kind of identity. She'd tell me about, oh, well, the Irish and the Polish, we'd never get along and we would get in these fights with our neighbors all the time. And it was interesting to have common ground with my adopted grandmother in a different way. But that is where their families are from.
Okay.
So the
Right
Czech
on.
immigrants, the Irish and the Polish immigrants right outside New York City.
I've got one more question. When you think about your trip to Korea, what are you hoping to, not like what are you hoping to change or get out of it or whatever, but like how do you anticipate, like, do you anticipate seeing yourself differently, feeling differently in your own body, having a different relationship with your husband? Or do you think it'll just like be you, but deeper?
I do think it will be me, but deeper. And yes and no. So I feel like my entire story arc of my life, building on everything piece by piece, I'm hoping that this trip will help me take both ends and just plug them in together and help me come full circle as a person. Because where I am right now in my identity is I don't belong anywhere, but this liminal space that I occupy, this is mine. This is mine right here. And I'm hoping to become a little bit more empowered. I'm hoping to understand myself a little bit more and to be a little bit more comfortable with that idea of, well, maybe you'll never feel like you belong somewhere, but that's your space and that's okay. And my husband has a really unique viewpoint. He gets me 1,000%. He is an unapologetically New York Italian man, 50%, and a 50% Black man. And we can share our identity struggles. And I don't know if I could ever be him because he's got these two completely opposite worlds trying to fit together somehow. And he's got two communities, I guess as well, besides Korean American. He's got these two communities where he is seen as other. He belongs, but not 100% with them.
Yeah.
He's not Black enough to be Black. He's not Italian enough to be. So it's we both are journeying along parallel to each other, and he's been an amazing source of strength.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and on that topic, he also has your name and Korean flag tattooed on on him.
I totally forgot about this. That I put this down.
That you wrote that down.
Oh my
I forgot
God.
to ask you, and when you said that, when you started talking about him, I was like, oh, that reminds me. There is something I wanted to ask, and that, please explain this. That's amazing.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, my husband, and this is a completely controversial topic. I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm just trying to tell the story of my life. So no opinions, no judgments, no nothing right here. My husband is a self-labeled weeaboo. And
All right.
he is, I think that's the word.
Yeah.
I haven't heard it in a long time. He is obsessed with Asian culture. He celebrates every little thing that is Korean about me, every little, piece of food, from learning Korean to eating everything to he loves it. TV shows and music. And when I introduced him to Epic High, I feel like it was some kind of turning point in his life. It's like, I've discovered a new me. And we met online. Okay, so this is not why we got together. We met online. We didn't know what each other looked like. I didn't even know he was a man. So this is a complete twist of fate that we grew up close to each other, and I apparently check all of his wife boxes. So
And I hope so, since you're married. So
And he's like, I'm living the dream. I have received everything I've wanted from the universe. And he is like, I am so proud to be married to you. I am so proud to love you. I want a tattoo. And I'm going to get a tattoo. It's going to be the flag. And and some people, growing up, whatever you think about people, getting the names of their lovers tattooed on them, and then, a lot of times you got to go back and tattoo over it. And he's like, I think I want to put your name there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please don't do that. But, do your thing. But I'm like, you know what? Who am I to tell you how to live your life? You're living your authentic you. I'm going to support you 1,000%. And he's like, but I want it done right. So I didn't want him to walk into any place here in North Carolina and like get it backwards or something. So I did a little research and I found a Korean Adoptee tattoo artist. Am I allowed to put a plug in here? Because he was phenomenal. His name is Todd Heckert. He goes by One Tribe, and he did my sleeve too. But this is later after my husband went first. And I'm like, I trust this guy. His work looks amazing. I know he's going to get this done right. It's not going to be backwards. It's going to be great. So I didn't go with him, but the story apparently goes, it's like, I want my wife's name. It's Sujan Hangul. And he said, yeah. And he turned to me and he looks at me and he goes, are you sure? And he's like, yes. Sure. But anyway, it's just one of a few things. He graduated from law school, so he actually incorporated the Korean flag into the scales of justice. And it was very cool. It's very tasteful. And he got my name with Todd, and he got a samtaeguk. Add the little spiritual element. I'm a very spiritual person, so I absolutely love it. The harmony of man, heaven, and the earth where we are. I like that.
That's awesome. I love his dedication, so I can't, again, good job.
Also, a self-proclaimed weeaboo is incredible.
Yeah.
Which, for the uninitiated, typically, if you Google it, it's like a Japanese type term for somebody who's like obsessed with Japanese culture. I hear it a lot in like anime circles. A couple of my coworkers would probably also self-identify as close to that. But yeah, that's awesome. But then I saw it. Yeah, I was like, oh, he's got your name. He's got Korean flag. He's got the samtaeguk, which the samtaeguk is, for those who don't know, the taeguk in the Korean flag is the red and the blue. Samtaeguk is the like old school style, or you have the yellow color in there. Which I love that. If ever I was going to get a tattoo, the samtaeguk would be the way to go for me too, because that I need that trio of balance up in there. So yeah, that's awesome.
He is confident and unapologetic in who he is, and I respect that.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, I love the support. But Amy, this has been amazing talking with you. We're so sorry that it took this long to get to you, to talk to you.
I love you guys. I'd wait forever.
But this is awesome though, that it is right before your trip to Korea as well. So maybe it worked out for reasons, right?
Yeah.
And
yes.
And
I do believe
we can't
that.
wait to hear more about your trip, maybe, after you get back and everything. So, definitely keep in touch. But for all the listeners or anybody who may want to find you, is there a place that they can contact you or connect with you on social media?
No, I'm a hermit. I'm a hermit.
No, just this podcast. Listen to it on repeat.
Yes. I'm going to be better. I made an Instagram. I'm proud of myself. So I can creep on my brother's family photos on Facebook, but I made an Instagram. I've resolved to fill it up. So
all right.
Okay.
It's my goal this year.
Yes, well,
that's awesome.
I'm so sorry.
Oh no,
not a thing to apologize for. If it weren't for like this podcast, I'd be like, don't talk to me, go away. Like, I'm closing all of my accounts. Stop it.
But no, we appreciate your time, your story, and just you in general. So thank you so much for sharing everything with us. And
thank you guys. Thank you so much for having me. I adore you. Love it.
We hope to meet you maybe in person one day. I saw that you had talked about, other conferences and conventions. So maybe one of these days. But yes, thank you again. And I think we'll probably we don't have a snack, unfortunately. Again, sorry about that. But
spiritual snack.
Yes.
We'll meditate a little bit.
Yes.
Nice. Yeah. The snack is internal meditation, self-actualization.
Yes.
Love it. Okay. Well, how do I do this? You may not be able to find Amy, but you can find The Janchi Show on all social platforms at Janchi Show. You can send us an email to janchishow@gmail.com. You could call or leave a text message if you want to 972-677-8867. We'll read those out or play those on the air and respond to them. It's a good time. Just like with whatever, adoptee related, non-adoptee related, just say hi. If you could leave us a review on iTunes. People still call it iTunes, Apple Music, podcast,
Apple
whatever.
Podcasts.
Yeah, leave a review where you can. That'd be awesome.
Where you're listening. That's fine.
Head to janchishow.com to see more about us, or janchishow.com/support to support the podcast. You can follow Patrick in the World, absent though he was from this interview. Patrick at Patrick in the World, absent though he was from this interview. I am at KJ Roelke, wherever I want to be found on the internet.
I am N Nowak on Instagram.
And this has been the Janchi Show. Amy, since Patrick isn't here, we, as you probably know, yell Janchi Heyo at the end of every episode. Will you join us in yelling, please?
Okay, I'm going to try hard not to mess it up.
Thank you, everybody, for listening next week. Until next time, Janchi Heyo!